Okay, let's take this image and edit it for drama. Okay, we've got this little girl climbing the steps in her red dress and her parents just off to one side, but the whole thing is perhaps just not as dramatic as I would like or imagine when I was capturing the image. Okay, so I'm going to start this project by going to the lens corrections panel, and we'll just click on the enable lens profile corrections to remove that barrel distortion from this wide angle lens. And we'll also click on the color tab and remove the chromatic aberration, which is usually all present in all wide angle images. And then we'll click on the manual tab and we'll see whether upright can correct both the tilted image and also the converging verticals. And that seems to have done a sterling job. So we'll move forward back in the basic panel to start editing for drama. Again, I'd like to point out that a lot of these settings are very subjective, and you may like to adjust or vary the settings for your own personal taste. I'm finding the images perhaps a little bit bright, so I'm going to drop that by half a stop or so. And the highlights are sort of blowing out in the sky, so I'm going to grab the highlights and pull that down to -100. The whole thing needs a kick in contrast, I believe, so I'm going to raise that to around about +40 or so. Now as soon as I start raising the contrast, increasing the drama, I always feel that the colour sometimes gets in the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the vibrance down to about -65. And you'll notice the difference between vibrance going down all of the way to 0 is it does leave some of the colours left a little bit saturated, as opposed to the saturation slider, which will desaturate all colours equally. So what I'd like to do is just take most of the colours down, as I said, by -65, and then find the key colours which are a little bit saturated still, and then move those back a little bit higher. Okay, so basically restricting the color palette here by taking the key colors that were already saturated and hanging on to their saturation value and pushing all other colors down. As soon as we take these sorts of actions, then we can probably add even more drama. Here I'll push the clarity slider up as well. We'll start off with about -50 and then see how we go from there. Okay, so we're still losing a little bit of that sky, so I'm going to try and recover that in the HSL tab, Hue, Saturation and Luminance, and it's the luminance of the sky that is of greatest interest to me. We can use the tools over here. We can pull down the luminance with this tool and then click and drag down, or we can just drag the slider itself. Here this time I'll actually use the tool and click and drag that luminance down, and we'll go down to about -50 on those blues. I always don't like to push the blues too far, because we can get image artifacts appearing when we push those blue slider to the extremes. I'd also like to change the hue of this sky color ever so slightly. I'm just going to push it so it matches some of the more redder tones in these blues surrounding these sky. So I'm just going to push that blue hue up by about 10. Okay, you can see the way I'm going. If I was pushing that really high, you'd see we were getting that purple color, but about 10 should give me a nice color palette that sits comfortably with the adjacent colors. Okay, the rest of the drama is going to come via some graduated filters, so we'll just click on we'll press the G on the keyboard or click on that graduated filter icon there, and I'm going to take down the exposure perhaps a little bit more than half a stop. I'll go for the full stop, and I'll also increase the clarity because I want to really put some drama into those clouds. So I'll raise the clarity slider to around about 70 there, and then click and drag down through that sky. I'm just going to hold down the shift key in order to constrain that graduated filter to a perfect vertical. Okay, that's really brought the sky back in now. I'm going to add another graduated filter at the base of the image, and this will basically walk the eye up the steps towards the girl. Okay, so I'll just click right at the base of the image and then pull that up. Okay, just a couple of steps there. Now I don't want the clarity in this instance, so I'm just going to double click on the clarity slider, and I'm going to push the exposure down by another half a stop or so, so we really create some darkening. Just so you can see a before and after here, I'll just click on and off the preview to show you the effect of how we draw people in towards the light, especially towards this girl climbing the steps here. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move over to the adjustment brush. The parents are sort of getting lost in the shadows there, so I'm just going to click on the plus exposure, half a stop exposure. Now you'll see I'm working with feather, flow and density all set to 100, and I don't want the auto mask on, so I'm going to switch that off. Okay, because that can create artifacts when we're working with heavy adjustments such as exposure. Okay, and I'm just going to put a little puddle or pool of light around the parents here on the steps, so we can notice them in the shadows there. Okay, if we were to push that too far, it almost look like they've been hit by a spotlight, but somewhere subtle, somewhere between, you know, around about that half a stop, just puts a little bit more light into that area. Okay, because we put clarity down into that graduated filter, I'm noticing a small halo kicking off the side of this building. Okay, and this is where I'm going to actually add a negative clarity slider. So we're just going to click on that negative next to the clarity and push all that clarity slider all the way down to -100. This is an instance where I actually can now use that auto mask feature, and as long as I keep the crosshair behind this edge here, I can just remove that halo running down along that wall there and not overlap or go into that building area there. If I just hover my mouse cursor over, you can see through the overlay color there, I've just removed a negative clarity adjustment just in the sky only. Okay, so now we're going to return basically to the basic panel. I just clicked on the zoom tool to exit the brush, the adjustment brush tool, and then I'm going to click on the basic panel again. Now we still have a black point inside of this image, but we seem to be losing the white point because we've been bringing a lot of the brighter tones down. So I'm just going to hold down the Alt key, PC, or the Option key on the Mac, and then click on the white slider and raise that until we find a white point within the image, and it's just appearing on the girl there. So we'll just raise that a little bit more. I think maybe the image is going a little bit dark now, so I'll just back off on that exposure slider gradually. Okay, now we can push the image a little bit further. There's a few distracting details in the image that I'd like to remove. I noticed there's a person on this boardwalk over here and some sort of a vehicle on the top of the steps, which is slightly distracting. So I'm going to remove these using a brush, and also going to defocus the edge of the image. Again, this will help us draw us into the image. I think I'll do that one first. As I said, really there's no specific order we need to do these things, but I'll start with the defocusing using the radial filter. Okay, now we're going to click on the negative sharpness, and that zeroes all of the other sliders, and then we can push that sharpness all of the way down to -100. I'll click in the center of the image and then click and drag down towards the lower right hand side there. Now I can float this selection just by holding down the space bar and reposition that at any time. Okay, I'm just going to off-center that slightly on the left-hand side there. Now I've got the radio button selected to outside, so the defocusing action is taking place on the outside. We could also add in some additional adjustments. Maybe we could take the exposure down just a fraction, a quarter of a stop there, and we could also take out some of the clarity just to lower the contrast. Okay, and maybe even lower the contrast as well. Okay, so now we're really pulling the eye in towards the center of the image, creating a sort of a shallow depth of field effect there. Okay, so now we're going to remove these distractions, and we're going to do that using the spot removal tool, which has had an overhaul recently, and we can do a lot more than we ever used to be able to do using this tool. I'm just going to zoom in a couple of times Okay, and so we can see some of these distracting details that I'd like to get rid of. Okay, I'm just going to increase the size of the brush. I can either use the size slider or use the square bracket keys. I'm using the closed square bracket next to the letter P on the keyboard, just large enough to cover this man who looks like he's on a mobile phone or something. And we'll just click once. Okay, now if you're lucky, you'll find that Photoshop creates a fix that is appropriate. That seems to have not done too badly, but remember, you can always move this adjustment point to an area that is ideal for us. Now we're moving into an area that's slightly out of focus, but as you see, as it moves into the healing area, it goes back into focus. This is really the beauty of non-linear editing. These are the sort of things that often cause us a great deal of difficulty when we're working in layers in the main editing space. We've also got this truck over here, and I can just click, not just click once, but I can actually click and now drag around that vehicle, okay, until we've got it all covered. And as soon as we've got that covered, we can let go of the mouse. This time Photoshop hasn't chosen an appropriate area, so we are going to have to manually move that. Now I'm going to move it onto the steps just over to the right side there. Now sometimes these filters can work a little bit slowly, so we just have to be a little bit patient with these. I just need to nudge those steps down a fraction, so these steps will line up, and there they go, they're lining up now. Okay, I'm just going to reduce the size of the brush because there's some strip lights here which are slightly distracting as well. I'm just going to click once at the beginning of that strip light, and then I'm going to move to the other end of this strip light here, hold down the shift key and then click a second time. And what we'll find is Photoshop will now connect the start and finish points, and I might need to reposition that to get the best possible fix. And I can repeat the process in other areas. Okay, just one click, hold down the shift key, second click. Okay, and this time it's chosen a very different area. That's not too bad actually. It's creating a nice heel area there. Okay, and there's a little white line. We can probably play with this for hours trying to get rid of distracting details. Just one click, hold down the shift key, second click, and I think Photoshop is going to choose an appropriate area this time. Yes, we're lucky that time. And I'm just going to move over to the left side of the image. There's a couple of distracting details there. I'll just click and drag over that one, and that looks like it's being healed very quickly. And there's some sort of structure on the top of this wall, so I'll just increase the size of the brush and just paint over that area. And if we're unlucky, we'll pick up a bit of that grass. I just might move that just a little bit further north. Okay, and let's just zoom out, Command 0, see if we've got all of the distracting details. There's one just up in the area here. I'll just zoom in on that a couple of times and remove that distracting detail. And let's just find that area there. Okay, now that's a good fix. So I'm going to come back out. I think I've fixed as many things as I need to fix. I'll just do a Command 0 to fit on screen there. Okay, now in order to finish this project, I'm going to work go to the FX panel. I don't want particularly a border, a vignette for this one. I'm going to just create a black border. So we're going to go to Color Priority, choose Amount. I'll raise that. Well, instead of a white border, maybe I'll move that down so I've got a nice black border. I'll move the midpoint down as well, and also the roundness down. And as you can see now, we're getting that black border that I was looking for. If I move the midpoint slider back, we can push that further back towards the edge. Okay, and that creates the finished version that I'm looking to create. Now if you wanted to see a before and after of this one, let's just go and have a look at the Camera Raw defaults. Okay, and as you can see, That is a very, very different image, full of drama and life, and the viewer's attention now is drawn towards the girl taking great enjoyment climbing the stairs with the parents walking in the shadows to the left.